We'll cover it, guaranteed, but we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, with fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine still potentially on the table, the German Chancellor has been in Moscow this afternoon in a bid to talk Putin down from the brink of war. We'll get the latest from Berlin and Kyiv on this fast-moving story. The Prime Minister today suggesting that there are mixed messages coming from Moscow. Also coming up after the resignation of the Met Chief Person Dick, the Metropolitan Police Federation says it no longer has confidence in the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. We'll be talking to a London Assembly member about that. And as bills continue to soar, we'll speak to a Conservative MP on how the government can address the issue. And also, will Jeremy Corbyn be deselected as a Labour MP? Give me your thoughts on all the latest political news. As always, want to hear what you've got to say. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. It is just after 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Let's bring it to date now with the very latest news and Rosie Wright.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, President Putin says he does not want a war in Europe and that troops are being partially withdrawn from the Ukrainian border. He's been speaking in Moscow alongside the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz as European leaders continue to urge President Putin to de-escalate. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says there isn't any evidence of a Russian withdrawal from the Ukrainian border.
We have not seen any de-escalation on the ground, not seen any signs of reduced Russian military presence on the borders of Ukraine. But we will continue to monitor and to follow closely what Russia is doing.
In the UK, following an emergency Cobra meeting, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the intelligence is still concerning, but that diplomatic channels remain open with Russia.
The intelligence that we're seeing today is still not encouraging. We've got Russian field hospitals being constructed near the border with Ukraine in Belarus for only can be construed as a preparation for an invasion. You've got more battalion tactical groups actually being brought closer to the border with Ukraine, according to the intelligence that we're seeing. So mixed signals, I think, at the moment.
Research shows people who've been fully vaccinated are less likely to be affected by long COVID. The findings come from the UK Health Security Agency, which has released a review of 15 studies. Its head of immunisation, Dr Mary Ramsey, says it shows getting a full course of jabs is the best way to protect yourself. Now, people in Wales will be able to receive extra support to help manage the cost of living crisis. The Welsh Government says they're going above and beyond by offering a package, including a £150 cost of living payment. There's also an extra £200 for low-income households next winter. Northern Ireland's remaining coronavirus restrictions will be lifted and replaced instead by guidance. The rules requiring, therefore, face masks in public places and the need to show a COVID certificate for nightclubs will be dropped today. Immigration rules on care worker jobs have been relaxed. The profession of care worker has now been added to the government's list of occupation shortages. Well, the list is designed to help migrants get work visas to fill jobs where there are significant staffing shortages. The social care sector has struggled to attract and then retain staff. World tennis star Novak Djokovic says he won't defend his Wimbledon or French Open title if the tournaments require mandatory vaccination for competitors. Speaking to the BBC, he said it was a price he was willing to pay and that he prioritised what he puts into his body over a trophy. The 34-year-old, who is not vaccinated against COVID-19, distanced himself from the anti-vax movement and said he'd had vaccinations as a child. The government has outlined more details over plans to protect leaseholders from cladding costs. They want developers and manufacturers to pay for replacing dangerous cladding in order to protect renters. If they don't address and pay to rectify safety issues, the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities say they could be prevented from building in the future. A study has found potentially toxic levels of pharmaceutical drugs in a quarter of the rivers across the world. The National Academy of Sciences surveyed more than 1,000 sites, including the Thames in London, the Amazon in Brazil. And the research measured the presence of 61 substances that pose a risk to freshwater habitats and wildlife. Bristol Zoo Gardens in Clifton is going to shut its doors for good in September, having been open since 1836. They've been struggling with a lack of visitors over recent years. All of the animals will move to a wildlife park in South Gloucestershire. Over the years, they've helped save 175 species from extinction through its conservation programmes. A 16-year-old is going to attempt to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. Mac Rutherford says he's determined to follow his older sister Zara, who last month broke the record for the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. The British-Belgian teenager aims to break the record currently held by Briton Travis Ludlow, who completed the trip aged 18 years and 150 days. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Let's head back, though, now to Darren for the briefing.
Yeah, it is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Thank you indeed for your company throughout the hour between 3 and 4. Let's start with the big story today, and that is that the Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is partially pulling back his troops from the border with Ukraine after a build-up had raised fears of an invasion. Ukraine and Western powers said they would wait to see proof, though, of that pullout, saying that when we see the withdrawal, then we'll believe the de-escalation. More than 100,000, of course, Russian troops have massed at Ukraine's border, with Russia always denying it planned an attack. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts aimed at warding off a potential crisis have continued today. Within the past hour, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has met with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. We'll get more on that in just a moment. But first, the Prime Minister was speaking a little earlier in Downing Street about the tensions in Ukraine, and here's what he had to say.
That's why it's so important, Joe, that we support Ukraine and that we show that we have a package of tough, very, very tough economic sanctions ready to go, and that we support Ukraine militarily in the way that we are. The UK has been out in the front in delivering defensive but lethal military aid in the form of the anti-tank weapons, as well as the training that we've done over many, many years. The UK has been giving a lot of support to Ukraine. Final thing I would mention, this is a very difficult decision that we've just taken, and that is to keep our embassy going in Kyiv and to continue to ask Melinda Simmons, our fantastic ambassador, to do what she's doing. Now, that's a balanced decision. We have to face the fact that there is a risk. We'll keep it under constant review. But one of the things we want to do is to show the UK's continued support for Ukraine, for stability in Ukraine. And I believe that keeping our embassy going for as long as possible is an important symbol.
Finally, you talk about sanctions on the topic of money laundering. Some of your Conservative colleagues, especially senior figures on the backbenches, say that this government hasn't done enough to stop the flow of dirty money into this country. Can you promise that the economic crime bill will be in the next Queen's speech?
So I don't think that it's fair to say the UK hasn't done a huge amount on dirty money, whether it's from Russia or anywhere else. And we've actually been globally, we've been out in the lead in tackling global corruption, in tracing the sources of ill-gotten gains. And we have imposed some very tough sanctions, if you recall, after the Russian invasion of or the Russian annexation of Crimea, of Sevastopol in 2014. Those sanctions remain in place. We have sanctions against everybody involved in the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, for instance. But what we want to do is strengthen now the package that we have, strengthen the measures we have against potential ill-gotten Russian money, whether here or anywhere in anywhere for which we have responsibility, with new measures that will hit the companies and concerns that I've talked about, but also open up the matryoshka doll, if you like. You know what I'm talking about, so that we see who really owns the companies that we're talking about, who really owns the properties that we're talking about. And those measures, yes, we will be bringing forward from the economic crime bill.
In the Queen's speech?
Yes.
Within the last hour or so, of course, President Putin has met and held a press conference with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in which President Putin said he does not want to see war in Europe. He talks about that he wants to see proposals put forward to start a negotiation process, but he says that there's been no constructive response to Russia's proposals. This is what Vladimir Putin has had to say. He adds that there are still issues being put forward by NATO and the US, which could be discussed. Well, let's get more on what has happened today in Moscow. Let's go to Berlin. German correspondent Thomas Barrow joins us there. Thomas, very good afternoon to you. This press conference just ended in the last couple of minutes. What did you take away from it that you thought was significant?
It was particularly important to hear Vladimir Putin say that he was interested in talks with NATO or with the United States over security assurances, and it was also important to hear from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz that he believed that partial troop withdrawal was a good sign, but that more concrete signs were needed from Russia. I would still say that the situation remains very tense indeed. The differences between Russia and Germany, between Russia and the West, were very clear also during that press conference. But there may be minor signs, minor points that could point towards first steps of de-escalation in this current situation. The German Chancellor once again stressed that he wants more channels of communication, that he believes in the possibility of finding a solution through diplomatic means. And he stressed a variety of formats in which Russia, Germany and other countries could actually come together to try and find those solutions. One of the most important ones for Germany, from a German point of view, is a so-called Normandy format in which Germany and France have a mediating role. Russia and Ukraine also take part, and that's a format that has been going on for quite some years now, but ultimately stalled, and Germany and France are trying to revive. So basically some minor steps in the right direction. Those are the first analyses that I've also seen from here from Berlin, but more still is needed if the idea is to find a diplomatic solution to the current standoff.
And there was questions, wasn't there, Thomas, as well, about Nord Stream 2. Of course, this gas pipeline that goes from Russia directly to Germany, with Chancellor Scholz saying that he still wants to see energy supplies still function to Europe, irrespective of what happens.
And that's particularly important because if you look at the German-Russian relationship, it's very important from an economic point of view. This Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which is waiting for regulatory approval, it's completed, is actually important from both points of view, from Russian and Germany. And for a long time, it has been held as a sort of private sector enterprise. In fact, German Chancellor Scholz stressed that some time ago. He then changed his mind. And Vladimir Putin today also mentioned that no politics is involved there, that he sees it as an economic project altogether. But Nord Stream has become a very big problem for Germany. Some of Germany's closest allies, from the United States to European countries like Poland, believe not only that Nord Stream would give too much power to Russia, but that it could leave Europe vulnerable. And that's why Germany's allies have been pressing for Germany to have a clear stance that if Russia invades Ukraine, then Nord Stream would be stopped. It was interesting that only a few days ago, when Olaf Scholz visited Washington, it was actually Joe Biden who said those words. It was Joe Biden who said, if Russia invades, Nord Stream will not happen. And since then, pressure has been growing on Olaf Scholz to say something similar. Scholz has stressed that all options are on the table, that if Russia does take a step too far, then Germany will act in accordance with all of its allies, together with its allies imposing sanctions. But it has been a rather difficult proposal altogether for Scholz and for the German government to clearly state in plain words that Nord Stream would be stopped if Russia invades Ukraine.
And just very finally on this, Thomas, is there a sense, and it's difficult to know today, you know, there's a lot of misinformation around, clearly, but is there a sense that Vladimir Putin, from the German perspective, does want a diplomatic solution to all of this, or that simply he is playing politics? Where's the German position in all of this? Clearly here in Britain, our Prime Minister has made it clear that he's pretty cautious about any statements that the Russian president make. Is that different where you are in Berlin?
Germany is following a two-path strategy. That's something that has been clearly described by Mr. Scholz. On the one hand, that very clear focus on diplomacy, that very clear interest in finding diplomatic solution, in bringing Russia to the table. I already mentioned this Normandy format in which Germany plays a leading role. But on the other hand, the second part of the strategy is stating that Germany will act swiftly with its allies within NATO, within the European Union, if Russia goes a step too far. And that was something that was also very clear today during that press conference, those two elements of Germany's strategy, but the hope, the absolute hope here in Germany, something that we've heard not only from Mr. Scholz, but also from other officials, is that all this will be resolved through diplomatic means.
Thomas, as always, appreciate your analysis. There's Thomas Barrow there, our reporter, joining us from Berlin. Well, let's head now to Kyiv. And joining me now is Alex Konchankarenko, who is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament. Alex, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. First of all, what is your sense of these reports that we've heard today that the Russians seem to be withdrawing some of their troops? Is there any evidence from what you've seen or other people in Kyiv that that is happening?
No, for the moment we don't have any evidence of this, only some statements of some Russian military officials, so that's all. But today we have another thing, the decision of Russian parliament to recognize the so-called republics in Donetsk and Lugansk, Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian Donbass, and that is a clear act of aggression from Russian Federation against Ukraine. It means that Russian parliament recognized part of our territory being independent, and they sent this decision to Vladimir Putin for a final decision. So it's a clear act of aggression, and we saw it yesterday. And certainly I would like to stress that these territories are Ukraine, and we will never recognize them as an independent country, so states, as I am sure that the whole world will not recognize.
President Putin, during that press conference of the last hour, said that what's happening in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine is genocide. He said that Russophobia, was the first step towards genocide. Do you recognise any of that there is genocide happening in the Donbass region?
Certainly there is genocide happening there, but organizer of this genocide is Putin. Putin is a Hitler of 21st century, and he killed more Russian-speaking people than anybody else in the world. So there is a genocide there, but from Russian Federation. And we lost more than 14,000 of Ukrainian citizens' lives during the last 8 years, during this war that Putin launched against our country. So he is responsible for this. The war crimes, awful things like, for example, hitting Boeing of Malaysian Airlines in summer of 2014 with almost 300 people killed and other things. And I want very much to see Vladimir Putin in Hague tribunal for these crimes.
Many people would suggest that is it not sensible that Ukraine says, well, we're not going to join NATO, to make that clear, to make that commitment, given the fact the chances of joining NATO at this moment in time are pretty limited anyway? Wouldn't that be a way to ensure that this invasion doesn't happen?
We're speaking about strategic aim of Ukraine, and our strategic aim is to be member of NATO. That is written in our constitution, and that is supported by Ukrainian society. And we hope that our allies, and by the way, I want to thank the United Kingdom and the United States, which are really very big supporters now of Ukraine, that together we can do it and we can become a member of NATO. And just for your understanding, if Russian blackmailing will be effective now, like it was a year ago, remember that a year ago it was the very same situation, but Putin wanted waiving off the sanctions from Nord Stream 2 and a meeting with Biden. Unfortunately, this blackmailing was successful, and Putin decided to move it forward, to do it again. So if he will be successful now, he will continue his blackmailing, and that's all. He will never stop. He doesn't believe in our values. He doesn't believe that Ukraine is a sovereign state. So he will continue his way to Yalta world, where he and some other big guys will sit and with pencils will make marks on the map on the world and said, this is Russian, this is not Russian, but it couldn't be like this in 21st century. We're a sovereign state, we're making our decisions ourselves, and I believe that there will be a day when NATO states will support us and Ukraine will be a member of European Union and NATO, and it's not to Russia to decide this issue.
Okay, and very finally, Alex, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has announced a kind of day of unity tomorrow. Just explain what that is.
We're speaking about really Ukrainian society is now on the high spirit. We are ready to fight for ourselves, but we don't want the war. That is absolutely clear. And tomorrow we just want to show to the whole world that we are ready to fight for our countries. And that's true. And I'm sure that will stop Putin from invasion, that he will see that each city, each town on the way of Russian soldiers will be like a fortress. And he will pay a very high price if he will decide to invade.
Okay, Alex Goncharenko, thank you very much indeed for joining us there.
Thank you.
Live from the Ukrainian capital, I should say. NATO, of course, suggesting that they have seen not much of this supposed de-escalation that Vladimir Putin has talked about. Vladimir Putin talking that he is going to pull back some of his troops from the Ukrainian border. We heard from Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, a little bit earlier, suggesting that they had no evidence that that was happening thus far. It is a fast-moving story, and we'll, of course, keep you abreast of it throughout the afternoon here on GB News. Though it is now 21 minutes past 3. You're watching us on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. This is The Briefing, coming up in just a couple of minutes. Do the police have confidence in Sadiq Khan? Should Jeremy Corbyn be deselected as an MP? And that cost of living crisis continues to bite. That and so much more. Just go ahead, stay tuned.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to The Briefing here on GB News. Do always get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the Metropolitan Police Federation has declared that it has no faith in Sadiq Khan. In a scathing statement days after Cressida Dick quit her job, the body, representing more than 31,000 rank-and-file police officers, said it was deeply disappointed at the very public ousting of Dame Cressida Dick from her role as the force's commissioner. It claimed that comments made by the Mayor of London had undermined the professional, dedicated and incredibly difficult work of tens of thousands of hard-working and brave police officers from across the capital. Well, join me now to discuss this is the London Assembly member, Emma Best. Emma, very good afternoon to you. What's your thoughts on what the Police Federation, the Metropolitan Police Federation, has had to say about the London Mayor?
Yeah, I think it's not surprising, really, that they've had to speak out of this, because that's the way in which the mayor's been conducting these affairs very publicly. And that's why I think they're upset, because, you know, they feel that Cressida Dick is a woman, whichever you might think of her, of duty. If she'd been asked to leave, if it had been done in the right way, perhaps when there was those contract negotiations back in September, you know, this could have been done in an entirely different way. There could have been succession planning for the contract when it was due to be up this year, and those conversations could have happened much more collegiately. But it does seem a little bit like Sadiq Khan, instead of taking on, you know, the problems with the leadership of the Met, is distancing himself entirely from the police. Now, he has a leadership responsibility here as well, but this very public way in which this has been put in Cressida, whatever failings we may assign to her, he's completely distanced himself from that. He's made the Met something wholly separate from him as the Mayor of London. And that's why I think it's unacceptable. Now, Sadiq Khan talked a lot about the way in which in the UK we police with consent. And that is very important. But it seems like the police at times are policing without his consent. And the way in which he's handled this has only really strengthened those feelings within our serving force.
I mean, in saying that, we all know that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, had all but lost confidence in her as well. We think she only essentially got that extension to her term because of the Prime Minister. I mean, at the end of the day, policing leaders need to be accountable to elected officials, don't they?
Absolutely. So I don't think anybody's, suggesting that Cressida Dick doesn't need to be accountable. But Sadiq Khan is also accountable as well. And if he had said at that time, back in September, that he had no faith in Cressida Dick, privately as part of those discussions, there could have been a plan for her to go this year. And I do believe if he had said that, it would have been completely, there would be no way she could continue. So that we can't suggest that it's the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary. If the Mayor of London doesn't have faith in the Commissioner, she has to go. And that could have been done in those negotiations in September much more neatly and given us much more time to have succession planning in place. Because at this time, it feels like we're in a bit of chaos now where we have to quickly apply. Now, the very public nature in which this is done, are we going to lose those outstanding applicants who may see the Met as, something that is perhaps untouchable at the moment? So we may have lost good applicants, which is a real shame as well. But I think that's the problem for me, is just the way in which this has been done. And the way now it feels like Sadiq Khan is turning away from any culpability from the mistakes of the Met. And I think that's what's making police officers angry, because they're as angry as any one of us at the failings of the Met. They are as angry and sickened as some of those stories as any one of us. But it feels like they're being slightly separated by this Mayor at the moment. And at the moment, I think we all need to, anyone that is to do with the leadership of the Met, us on the GLA, need to look at this, be accountable and think this is not good enough, and stand up and say, I want to play a part in the change. And I don't think what's happened so far is good enough.
And just very finally, Emma, on that, does this person, whoever takes over, need to be from outside the Met? Do you think that will be helpful, given that a large degree it was Cressida Dick's CV or previous actions that weighed heavily on her time in office?
I don't think necessarily the candidate has to be within or outside the Met. The Commissioner has to be a very special person with a very special set of skills. And I think looking at the scale of change that needs to happen, looking at the scale of the issues we have in the Met, we cannot discount anyone at the moment. And yes, we need somebody that, if they are from the Met, they can't be afraid of making that change. And they also have to have the authority within the Met and the ability to go in and change things. But I don't think that necessarily the next commissioner has to be within or without the Met. I don't think that we should, we may not get that many applicants, Darren, at the moment, after the way in which the current commissioner is being treated. So let's not rule any out.
Well, it almost sounds like someone's trying to get through to you to apply, Emma, there with the telephone in the background. Emma, thank you very much. There's Emma Best there, who's the Conservative Assembly member, or one of them who sits on the London Assembly. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing on GB News. In a couple of minutes, we can talk about the cost of living crisis, fuel prices hitting a new high at the pumps on a day that we saw real wages continuing to fall. We'll be talking about that across the country and with the Conservative MP. And also Jeremy Corbyn. Should he be deselected at the next election? Talking about that and so much more in the next 30 minutes. But first, here's the news at just after 3:30 with Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. President Putin says he does not want a war in Europe and that troops are being partially withdrawn from the Ukrainian border. He's been speaking today in Moscow alongside the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Well, the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said there isn't any evidence of a Russian withdrawal from the Ukrainian border. Boris Johnson says the intelligence shows there are mixed messages coming from the Kremlin. Research by the UK Health Security Agency shows people who are vaccinated are less likely to be affected by long COVID. Well, they found that 2 doses of Pfizer, AstraZeneca or Moderna, or the single-shot Johnson & Johnson jab cut the risk of developing symptoms by around a half. The number of UK workers in formal employment rose again at the beginning of this year. The Office for National Statistics said they were up by 108,000 between December and January. Salaries rose in the last quarter of the year, but continued to lag behind inflation, which is at a near 30-year high. Northern Ireland's remaining coronavirus restrictions will be lifted and replaced instead by guidance. The rules, therefore, requiring face masks in public places and the need to show COVID certificates to enter a nightclub will be dropped. The country's health minister will make an order revoking the rules today. 16-year-old Mac Rutherford is aiming to become the youngest man to fly solo around the world. Reaching new heights does appear to be a family trait. His sister Zara set the record as the youngest woman to fly on her own last month. You are up to date now here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Darren.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News and the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. It is 24 minutes now to 4 o'clock. Thank you for your company on this Tuesday afternoon. Fuel prices have hit a new record high at the pumps across the UK, ultimately tightening, of course, the squeeze on consumers. The AA has reported that oil prices hit the highest level since 2014 and they're expected to climb further in the coming weeks. But how does this impact on people's spending and their ability to move around? Our North West reporter Bradley Harris has been finding out.
These fuel increases are certainly going to have an impact for many, many people. There are over 30 million drivers in the UK, and for many people waking up, going into their car and heading off to work or to see family or friends, some people might be thinking twice before heading to the pumps. Certainly in the coming days and weeks, it'll be hard to ignore petrol forecourts showing prices of over £1.48 a litre. That's how much it was over last weekend. Last Thursday, diesel was actually over £1.51 a litre, and the AA are now saying that the cost of filling up a 55-litre family car will set you back over £81. So certainly people up and down the country who are already facing an impact on the cost of living crisis, energy bills going up. This will be an added cost for people who rely on cars to get around. Here in Altrincham, it's not the same as being in big cities such as London, where there are convenient, efficient and fast transport networks. For many people here, they have to rely on the car to get around. So as soon as the fuel prices go up, that immediately will have an impact on people. And I've actually been chatting to motorists to find out how much of an impact this is having. Let's just hear some of their thoughts.
A few months ago, we would think at weekend we'd go out for a run somewhere, be it Saturday or Sunday. Now we're thinking, we look at the weather, if there's any sort of chance of rain, miserable day, we'll say, no, it's not worth it, because when you used to travel 30 mile there, 30 mile back, fair enough. Now you do that and you look at how much it's costing you, just don't use the car, walk or stop in.
It's having a fairly big impact as I need to use the car for work. I work as a fitness instructor and travel to different leisure centres and health clubs around the area. If fuel prices got so high, then I'd maybe have to look at perhaps not travelling as far, changing my work routine. May have to change because it wouldn't be cost effective to be travelling to these places for what I get paid for doing the classes. Or my other alternative is I'd need to look at a smaller car or a cheaper car to run.
Well, I mean, we've got a couple of cars we use to do recoveries. We've noticed a difference there. You know, what we're doing the same amount of recoveries, but the fuel is we're using more fuel, it's more expensive, isn't it? So it's a tenner a week extra. We don't put that on the job. We just got to swallow that and just go with it.
Now, fuel prices at the pump are largely driven by the wholesale price of energy, which shot up recently because of tensions between Russia and Ukraine. On Monday, oil prices hit their highest level since 2014, reaching over $95 a barrel. At the moment, it's $1.48 here in Altrincham, but in the coming days and weeks to come, I think many people's eyes will be looking up to the signs on petrol forecourts, thinking twice before they fill up at the pumps.
There you go, that is our reporter Bradley Harris joining us. Well, let's now speak to the Conservative MP, Kevin Hollingreich, who joins us down the line. Kevin, good afternoon to you. This cost of living crisis seems no sign of abating. If anything, it's getting worse for people, as we heard there about fuel prices. Is there anything the government can do when it comes to specifically to filling up at the pump? We know that by far the biggest kind of cost to consumers at the pump remains tax, doesn't it?
Well, actually, the government levy on fuel is about 59p. So that's out of probably a litre of petrol, which is about 150 at the moment. So there are other factors, but nevertheless, there's VAT as well, of course. But the fuel duty has been frozen since 2009 by this government. So 12-year freeze. If it hadn't been for that, you probably can add another 30p on a litre of petrol or diesel. So it has done that. I mean, the government can't do anything unless it spends taxpayers' money. The government doesn't have its own money. So any intervention the government chose would cost the taxpayer something. So we've got to be very careful about intervening. We've done that recently, of course, with the cost of energy, about £350 a year per household, to try and halve the rise in the cost of energy, which is good. But there is a limit to what taxpayers can do.
You say there's a limit to what taxpayers can do, and that's why, we are seeing people really quite concerned, and we've seen this reflected in opinion polls, where they think the finances are going to get significantly worse this year. I mean, that's quite troubling, isn't it, for the government?
Of course it is. I mean, it's troubling for households, it's troubling for everybody. So it's, of course, the government's got to look at this, and there's lots of potential impacts on households, but also lots of potential second-round impacts, because the last thing what we want to happen is inflation run out of control, and then we get a constant increase in costs, the cost of living. So you get permanent inflation embedded in. As our son just passed me over there. So there are these concerns, certainly, but as I say, these are market forces. So energy prices are going up for a number of factors: the recovery from COVID, economic recovery, but also the tensions between Ukraine and Russia, as it said in your piece just then. And same with a barrel of oil. The price now a barrel of oil is about $100 a barrel, and that's up from it's more or less doubled over the last year or two. So some real impacts there, but these are market forces. Do we ask the taxpayer to step in every time these market forces drive prices up? I think it's a conversation we need to have, rather than simply jump for the taxpayer, go to the taxpayer and ask them to write a cheque.
Maybe your son's off to fill up the car before the prices get too high. Kevin, when we look at the details of all of this, there's a report out today saying that average real-term pay, so the amount of money that the average person in Britain takes home is still below that of what it was back in 2008, before the financial crisis. Only by a quid, but still, over the last 13 years, average earnings in Britain have not risen above that level. That is pretty damning of the Conservative government that's been in power since 2010. The people in real terms are no better off now than they were back in 2008.
I don't think that's totally fair. I mean, we suffered a huge hit to our economy in 2008, which this government had to try and repair that. And that cost a huge amount of taxpayer money, and it caused a huge amount of unemployment. A doubling of the level of unemployment. 1 million jobs went to the wall in that time, and that hit people's pay, of course. Look at this recession, to be fair.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt, Kevin. But that was a global financial crisis, and this actually is a picture that's quite unique to Britain about average pay. And the Labour Party may well have a point, don't they, when they say that Britain is a low growth country when it comes to our growth increases in the last 10 years or so. This is a problem that's relatively unique to Britain, actually.
That's not true, actually. Most countries are seeing a flatlining in average earnings and earnings growth.
Not for the last 15 years, they haven't.
Yeah, absolutely have. So, but there's no doubt the UK was particularly badly hit in 2000. And it was because we're heavily dependent on our economy in terms of services and banking. And a similar phenomenon, actually, in the COVID crisis. It's much more difficult to keep services going during a COVID crisis, so you close down larger parts of your economy. But I mean, what the government's done, quite rightly, it's focused on the bottom end of the income scale, so the national minimum wage, which is national living wage, which is an historic commitment, which is up to nearly £10 this spring. Also lowering the tax burden for people on lower incomes. So the average figures mask some benefits some people have seen. In cash terms, those people at the bottom end of the scale on full-time living wage, national living wage, are about £5,500 a year better off than they were in 2010. So there are some plus points here, but nevertheless, you're absolutely right. We've got productivity problems, and we've got average earnings problems, and a cost of living crisis. All those things coming together. Absolutely need to deal with those things, but what we've got to do is get the economy firing on all cylinders. This is about productivity. It's about the whole of the country contributing, and that's why levelling up is so important. Vast areas of the country are simply not as productive as the jewel in our crown, which is London and the South East, and that's what the government's committed to address.
Just very finally on this, one of the things that, of course, could help is immigration, simply because we've got well over 1 million job vacancies. I mean, the government says that in many ways it opposes immigration because it wants to see a high wage economy. We know that's not happening, hasn't been happening for the last 15 years or so. Is it time to look at immigration again as the solution to try and help Britain's economic growth, given that in the final quarter of last year it was 5th out of 7 when it comes to the G7?
Well, you're talking about two different things there. The controls in immigration only happened at the end of 2020, at the start of the COVID crisis. So what we're seeing here now, as immigration is more limited and more controlled, that should put pressure on wages, drive wages up, which is good for people that you're talking about. It's more difficult for employers. So yes, it could put some brakes on the overall economy, but it should mean employers get a better deal, workers get a better deal from their employers. So actually that should mean we get a higher wage economy. What we've got to be careful with is that doesn't feed inflation.
Yeah, indeed. And we go around. Kevin, we're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate your thoughts, as always. Kevin Holland-Rake, Conservative MP there, joining us down the line. OK, let's end by switching to Labour, because the former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, could soon be deselected from his Islington North seat, having had the whip removed in October 2020. Such a move is likely to anger, of course, left-wing figures within the party, as well as the trade union leaders, and may cause further rifts within Labour. So Keir Starmer has said an apology for Mr Corbyn would be too little, too late, with the potential move being cited as an attempt to separate himself from his predecessor. A lot of you very animated on this afternoon. We'll get to your views in just a second, but first let's bring in Tom Harwood, our political correspondent. Tom, just talk us through what is happening here. We know Jeremy Corbyn hasn't been a Labour MP for a while now. I mean, deselection would kind of be probably the nail in the coffin, if you like.
It certainly would. Of course, he hasn't sat as a Labour MP, as you said, since October 2020, when the EHRC report came out and Jeremy Corbyn seemed to belittle the problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. He was suspended because he didn't apologise for that, and up until now it has been received wisdom in UK politics that if he were to apologise, he'd be let back in to the Labour Party. Well, this weekend it now seems that an apology would not be enough, and interestingly, recently, in the last month or so, the Labour Party rules have changed, which give the NEC of the Labour Party more control over who can get to that long list for constituency Labour parties to select as their candidate. So the NEC within Labour, that governing body, is controlled by people who are allied more to Keir Starmer. So if they were to select a long list of people for Islington North, the constituency of Jeremy Corbyn, to select, who were all fairly anti-Corbyn people, well, Corbyn wouldn't have a hope because he wouldn't be on that list. He wouldn't be able to stand. That's despite, obviously, him having a personal following within that constituency Labour Party. And within that constituency, he's won it consistently since 1983 with big majorities. But the Labour leadership feels like, at the moment, it's in a strong enough position, controlling the internal democratic levers within the Labour Party to force him out.
Is this a battle that Keir Starmer wants to take on, in the sense that, you know, whatever you think about Jeremy Corbyn, his politics have not changed since he first won that seat decades ago. I mean, is there a sense that this is a fight the party? I mean, what I'm trying to demonstrate or trying to ask is that Jeremy Corbyn's not exactly part of the national political picture at the moment anyway.
Well, I think it's a fight that Keir Starmer wants to have. We've seen a very concerted effort from this new Labour leadership to try and say that the party has changed, to say that the party is a different party now from what it was just a few short years ago. And we've seen that with the welcoming of even a former Conservative MP defecting across to the Labour Party. The line that Keir Starmer said pointedly in the Commons at that Prime Minister's questions was, the Labour Party has changed, but the Tory party has changed as well, implying that the Tory party that won that election has abandoned its voters and the Labour Party is moving to that space. To some extent, Keir Starmer doesn't need to have this battle, but he sort of wants to, because the people around Keir Starmer believe that Jeremy Corbyn is, and the politics that Jeremy Corbyn represents, are electorally toxic, and the further they move away from that, the more likely they are to win an election. Now, there are lots of different views within the Labour Party of that, of course. Some people on the left of the Labour Party point to how comparatively well Jeremy Corbyn did in, well, still losing, but not doing as badly as people predicted of that 2017 general election, saying that maybe his politics weren't as unpopular as people thought, although 2019 seems to be the counterweight to that.
Well, lots of you getting in touch. John Drew says that Corbyn, no, he shouldn't be deselected. It says he failed because Labour were full of Blairites. If he'd been allowed his way, maybe Labour could have had a chance. Someone else getting in touch, Peter Steele, saying, again, also he shouldn't be deselected, but from a different point of view, saying he's an absolute liability and the longer he stays in Labour, the better. In saying that, someone else, one round by him, though, arguing that actually he wasn't very keen, this is Paul Lynch, on Jeremy Corbyn, but he let us down over Brexit. I've seen him give a talk, met him briefly, and he changed my view about him. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Sticking with Tom, let's move on, but stay with Labour for a moment. New poll out suggesting their lead over the government of the Conservatives has come down quite a bit. Is there a sign that actually maybe the Conservatives sort of draw back support, given that Partygate seems to have moved into a lull?
It's interesting. Yesterday, 3 polls came out. One was from Opinium, and talking to Opinium, they say that this doesn't represent a shift in Labour's position, but they've changed their methodology. So the Labour Party's lead collapsed from 10 to 3 points, not because something fundamentally changed in the electorate, but because they were measuring the electorate in a different way. So from Opinium's perspective, actually the Labour lead has always been a little bit lower than was thought for the last couple of months, because they're weighting the way that people switch from Tory to don't know in a different way, not switching over to the Labour Party. There are 2 other polls, though, YouGov and K&M, which have both seen a drop in the Labour Party share. So that we need to treat those 3 different polls in a slightly different way. But there does seem to be a bit of an ebbing of the Labour Party's lead, which potentially is because no one's talking about Partygate anymore.
Indeed.
The Prime Minister's almost got his wish. We've moved on. It's not leading every bulletin. People are talking about other things. And potentially, just potentially, like what started to happen in the beginning of January when the Labour lead also dipped, when the stories moved on before the further party stories came out, potentially Boris Johnson is in a sounder place when we can move that conversation on to stop talking about parties all the time.
Well, indeed, but there still, of course, is the police investigation and Sue Gray's report to come out in full. Just very finally, restrictions in Northern Ireland relaxed today. We know there's going to be a big statement probably next Monday or Tuesday of next week when Parliament is back. Looking now, almost inevitable, domestic restrictions are going to be lifted pretty soon, actually.
It's interesting. We can sort of look at this in a way that is almost inverse to public opinion. The science looks pretty sound here in terms of if we're not going to open now, then when? We're never going to be more immune as a population. Sort of what is the point at which people think we are going to open if we can't do it now? Because even though the society is pretty open in almost every way, deaths are now below, and have been for the last 5 weeks, below the average, the 5-year average for this time of year. So on the science, it seems pretty sound, but on public opinion, the public are very wary about this. The public are nervous about particularly the removal of the self-isolation requirement, and people understandably, because no other country has got to this stage yet, potentially because no other country had such a successful vaccination
I think Denmark
rollout.
has done it, but yeah.
Denmark and Israel were the two other countries, as well as the UK, that had a particularly successful vaccine rollout. So that's potentially there. But interestingly, at the start of the pandemic, many people now say that the government's science was wrong, but the public was with them in terms of not going with that initial first lockdown. So things have sort of flipped by this point.
We'll wait and see. Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Howard, our political correspondent, joining us in the studio. Just to say that lots of you have been getting in touch. Ron Wilkinson says that all motoring taxes should be paid at the pump, the road fund licence fee, for example, and that people essentially should be seeing a cut in what they've got to pay. And someone else talking about Ukraine, arguing that I don't think Putin has got the guts to invade Ukraine. This is Barbara Edwards. He's just all talk, just like all bullies. He backs down when you stand up to him. OK, that's it for today. I'm back again tomorrow at 3. Colin's up next, but first, here's the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Stormy weather on the way. We have an amber warning in place across parts of northern Britain for Wednesday from Storm Dudley. We've got a weather system crossing the country at the moment, followed hot on the heels by another one tonight, bringing more wet and windy weather. It's not until later tomorrow, though, that Storm Dudley arrives, bringing potentially damaging gusts of wind through the afternoon and especially through the evening. Back to this evening in parts of the east, dry and clear, turning a little chilly before the rain arrives. That rain spreading across all areas by midnight, falling as snow on the hills and mountains across Scotland. But rain elsewhere, and it's pretty much gone by morning. Temperatures dropping this evening, but by morning, that spell of wet and windy weather will actually lift the temperatures. So we start Wednesday 8-9 degrees Celsius, but it's going to be a windy day and a wet start across the northeast. Still some snow falling here over the hills. And then we look west as Storm Dudley arrives. Heavy rain, those bright colours across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England through the afternoon. We could see a very